Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Mise Passion, YouTube's premier channel about all things women's football. Match day number 14 of the Women's World Cup is just wrapped up here with some very thrilling endings to the group action on display today. And we'll start with that action with South Africa and Italy, as well as Argentina versus Sweden, which will be the first match I will look into and see what we learned from the Swedes and the Argentines today. Now, going into this match, both teams lined up in a 4-3-3 formation, and Sweden had already won the group, and Argentina were looking for a win themselves in order to guarantee themselves qualification into the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. And it's safe to say that going into the early stages of the first half and the second half, Argentina were the better side. Now, this match was very transition heavy here, with the teams easily conceding possession to one another, but Argentina going into the first half had some very good opportunities where they should have scored, but the Swedish defense did prove to be very strong against the Argentines here. And unfortunately, going into the second half, Argentina were still level when it comes to the scoreline. And with the time essentially not being on their side, given that they were in the second half of the game, step up as Stefania Banini, who in the 56th minute went for a solo charge which almost yielded a goal, but unfortunately her shot went a bit too wide. She did have options to pass the ball around and hopefully get herself into a better position to shoot from close range, but unfortunately, whether it's desperation or selfishness, she was unable to do so, and the scores would remain the same for the next 10 minutes when Sweden would finally open the scoring after a very good break by the Swedes, with Jakobsen putting in a very beautiful cross that Blomqvist would get on the other end of, heading the ball in to give the Swedes the lead, and Argentina firmly on the back foot from this point forward. And from this point forward, Argentina stepped up with the physicality. Now, in the first half, there was a lot of physicality involved as well, with the Swedes being the more dominant side when it comes to that, which actually ended up in an injury for Bonsegundo, one of the key players for Argentina. But now, going back to the second half, the Argentines stepped up to make sure that they get themselves something, especially with the clock running down and them not knowing the current results of the other match between Italy and South Africa, which could pretty much guarantee their elimination if they were not careful. And in spite of their best attempts to get forward and put themselves back on the score sheet, Argentina were unfortunately unable to do so, as eventually in the 90th minute of the game there would be a penalty call in the favor of Sweden after a few of the players were pulled down in the box, and Rubenson would convert the penalty to guarantee the loss for Argentina and make sure that the Swedes would only solidify their position in first place here. Overall, this was a very good and very thrilling match to watch here. For the Swedish team, it is a very good showing that they've really picked up the pace from their initial blunder against South Africa here, and they're looking very fit for the knockout rounds of the Women's World Cup here, where they will face up against the USA, and I do fancy their chances given how far the USA have been suffering so far in this tournament, so hopefully they can give a good account of themselves and possibly pull off an upset if possible. And as for the Argentines, this does mean that they have been knocked out of the Women's World Cup, and despite their very thrilling match against South Africa and their efforts here in this match against Sweden, and of course that really tight physical and entertaining match against Italy, they unfortunately came up short here when it comes to the necessary results needed, but I do believe that they also did give a very good account of themselves, and if results had gone the other way for them, maybe we might be seeing them in the knockouts. But hopefully come the next Women's World Cup in 2027, they can be much stronger and much better, given that they are going to be going through a very heavy transitional period in the next coming years here, given that the likes of Benini and Rodriguez are reaching the ends of their careers. So hopefully they can have a stronger team next time round. The next match of the day saw South Africa take on Italy, and again a clash to determine which team would go through to the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. South Africa lining up in a 4-4-2 formation and Italy lining up in a 4-2-3-1 formation. And just like the previous match, South Africa and Italy was full of so many heavy transitions throughout the entire 90 minutes, but the difference was that when it came to physicality, both teams were essentially matched here, so it made for a much more entertaining and gripping match. And early on, it was really Italy who were taking control of the match, as just in the 11th minute, a penalty was awarded to the Italians after a very poor tackle in the box, which Caruso, who was pretty much the woman of the match here, dispatched to give Italy the early lead, and Italy were looking the more dominant side here, even though South Africa had some very decent opportunities, and that is up until the 31st minute, where a very heavy pass by Orsi was unable to be intercepted by the keeper to make it an own goal and put South Africa back on level terms, and pretty much the game was open from there on, going into the second half of the match. And we'll be in the second half of this match where the most thrills and spills would go down, as early on South Africa were the threatening side here, as they had two very good opportunities to put themselves ahead, but unfortunately they were just not good enough in terms of the attempts here. But luckily in the 66th minute, Kgatlana would put Magaya through to make it 2-1 to the South Africans. But it would not last, as just 6 minutes later, Caruso would step up again to draw Italy level South Africa 2-2 to make sure that going into the extra time of the game, there would be a lot of dramatics that would be waiting to see if there would be a winner from this match. And going into added time of the match here, it would be the Italians who seem to be the ones who are heading for the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. But luckily for the South Africans, there was a lot of resilience from the team, as they still had a fighting chance here with 11 minutes on the mark here. And in the first minute, it would be Kgatlana who would step up this time with an assist from Magaya to score and make it 3-2 to the South Africans here. And from this point forward, it was just a matter of South Africa just staying in there, making sure that they would not concede a goal, which they ultimately succeeded in doing, especially with the help of some theatrics from Tlamini, especially towards the end there of the match. And ultimately, South Africa ran out 3-2 winners against Italy, with Italy joining Argentina and packing up early and leaving the Women's World Cup, and South Africa joining Sweden in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. And that means that South Africa will pair up against the Netherlands in the knockout stages here, and it looks like pretty much the Netherlands will run out the victors here in this match, given the poor performance that we've witnessed from South Africa throughout these group stages of the Women's World Cup. But at the same time, given how resilient and how fiery the spirit of South Africa is, there is a huge potential here for South Africa to possibly pull off an upset, as slim as it may be, against the Netherlands. But it definitely does promise to be a very exciting match to watch here come Sunday when they go up against each other. And just like with Argentina, Italy did give a very good account of themselves here at the Women's World Cup. It's just a shame that the results didn't go their way, and if they had just kept up some very good defensive astuteness at the back against South Africa, they would be the ones going through to the knockout stages. But it does seem that the future for Bertolini is looking a little bit too grey, and we'll see if there are going to be any ramifications from this early exit stage by the Italian Football Federation. But other than that, hopefully the Italians can come back stronger at the next World Cup and even at the next Euros. The next pair of matches that simultaneously kicked off on this match day was Jamaica versus Brazil and Panama versus France. And we'll start with Jamaica and Brazil here, with Jamaica lining up in a 4-1-4-1 formation and Brazil lining up in a 4-4-2 formation. And of course, Marta started in this match in what is a must-win situation for As Canarinhas if they were going to be looking for a knockout stage berth of the Women's World Cup here. And as has been the theme for this match day so far, there was a lot of heavy transitioning going on between Brazil and the Jamaicans here, with neither team really getting the better of the other in terms of getting themselves into good goal scoring opportunities. But throughout the first half, Brazil were the ones who were carving out the most opportunities and had the chance to go ahead at some very key moments, but unfortunately the Jamaican defense proved too strong, and the keeper Spence was always on point to make sure that she was going to save the ball should she be called upon to do so. And despite the best attempts by the Brazilians in the second half as well to get themselves on the score sheet and the potential for the fairy tale story for Marta's last dance to continue, unfortunately the match would end up 0-0 for both teams here, and that would mean that Jamaica would go through to the knockout stages, and effectively Brazil had been knocked out themselves of the Women's World Cup, which also means that Marta herself has played in her last ever Women's World Cup tournament here, and which means that throughout her entire illustrious career, that will be the one trophy that will have eluded her. But that does not take away from the greatness that is Marta and her legacy as well. And credit too must go to the Jamaicans for holding on to this game in spite of the onslaught of attack that was coming from the Brazilians here, and hopefully when they go into their next match, they'll be much better suited to attacking more than defending back, especially in such a deep level, considering that they continue to be going for history here. So good luck to the Jamaicans in the knockouts of the Women's World Cup. And the final game of the day brought in the goals galore here as Panama took on France, with Panama lining up in a 4-5-1 formation and France lining up in a 4-4-1-1 formation here. And early in the game, literally in the first minute, Marta Cox from well outside the box would score a worldie of a free kick to give Panama the early lead here. And France were evidently rocked here, and it took them up until the 20th minute to get themselves back on level terms with Panama here, after an attempted clearance by Salazar unfortunately went into the back of the net for an own goal. And from here it was pretty much open gates for the rest of the first half in favor of the French here, as in the 27th minute Diani would put in the second goal for the French here, and just a few minutes later she would have a penalty converted after there was a very poor handball that was conceded by the Panama defender here. And within the very end of the first half, in the second minute of extra time, Ligara could put in the fourth goal for France to give them the lead going into the second half of the match. And already on a brace early in the second half, Diani would make it a hat-trick after a second handball here was awarded against the Panamanians to give France another penalty, which Diani of course dispatched. And from here it would seem like it was going to be a resounding victory for the French here, if only for Panama, who decided to choose violence towards the very end here. As given that they had nothing to lose and everything to gain, Panama began to give France a fight for their lives, even though there was nothing on the line here, even for the French here. As at the 62nd minute, a penalty was given to the Panama team here after Riley Tanner was brought down in the box, and Pinzon will put the penalty away for Panama's second goal. And very late on in the game, the 86th minute, Cedeno would grab a rebound to make it 3 for Panama here, and it seemed like there was a huge game that was about to be on, with Panama making a very late resurgence and France looking to be on the panicking end of things here. But luckily for the French, they managed to gather themselves, as in the 9th minute of added time, Betcha would score a first ever international goal for the French here and make it ultimately 6-3 to the French side at the end of the game here. And with the end of the match, Panama would undeniably be leaving the Women's World Cup with their heads held up high and with a bang, considering the performance that they put in against the French, who, given that they're going forward into the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup, will be a bit worried by their leaky defense, considering that they conceded 3 goals to an unbelievably weaker side. And when they go up against their opponents there in the knockout stages, there will be a lot of concern there with the defense. But admittedly, Wendy Renard was not on the pitch here, so it won't be as much of a concern, I do believe, but it's still something to watch out for towards the knockout stages when France do eventually play. And those are the things that we learned from the matches on display today at the Women's World Cup. Tomorrow there will be Morocco versus Colombia, which promises to be a very enticing match, and Germany versus South Korea, which on paper should definitely go to the side of the Germans. So hopefully we will have 2 very good matches to watch there. But other than that, thank you very much for watching. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in tomorrow's video.